name is Sarai, and for my current issue in education, I decided to cover poverty in education. In this presentation, I just hope to inform you about physical, psychological, and sociological effects of poverty on students and why they can create barriers to equitable education, and why those are issues that, as educators, we need to be cognizant of. Here's a table of context if you want to give that a quick glance over. And then here's some cool quotes. I found a really fun slide theme, very fun colors. And the first part I want to go over is cognitive function. Basically, how does poverty affect your brain? According to the National Institute of Health, new studies found direct correlations between income and brain structure and function. Reports demonstrate that the effects are particularly large and seen in early development for children in poverty, meaning that the higher the poverty level or the further below the poverty line, the more of a difference we're seeing in cognitive brain function and brain growth. We're seeing the effects of this as early as infancy in brain scans, and there's reduced gray matter in the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain, which was a lot of words that I did not super understand when I first read them. So to break that down a little bit, is what that means is, goodness, I lost my notes. There we go. The frontal lobe, which is responsible for reason, learning of new concepts and retaining new concepts, creativity, decision-making, and then the temporal lobe, which is emotional intelligence and regulation, sensory processing, memory, and language. Those are critical areas of the brain, not just for a person to function, but also for us as educators, as those are kind of the things that we need to utilize to teach somebody something new. So these critical areas of the brain are not developing fully. It could be as a result of a mixture of things, stress, malnutrition, what have you, and can not only increase struggles in learning and retaining educational material, but also can predispose people to disorders like ADHD or other learning disabilities, increase of disruptive behavior, lack of impulse control, things of that nature. Beyond how poverty can affect your brain growth, it can also affect what happens at home for students who are living in an impoverished situation. Students who are living in poverty often have less access to resources that may be considered luxuries, internet connection, computer, etc. Redlining, which is now technically illegal in the United States, but still happens, can affect the way that schools are funded and can systematically put students at a disadvantage. And then parentification is something that isn't super talked about, but it's a phenomenon that occurs in many families, whether they are extremely well off or extremely poor, but it is common in impoverished families because often the parents either are not home, are not emotionally available, or the children are put in a situation where they are having to care for younger children. Whether the parents are out of the home working for long periods of time, or if the child is responsible for bearing large amounts of adult financial stress, etc. So that can be an additional stressor for children experiencing poverty. The second section I have is about higher education, and I just thought that this was relevant because we are experiencing higher education. And what your journey is as an educator. It will not matter if you're, talking to a 5-year-old about what their situation is at home or talking to an adult. These issues affect everybody. So poverty in college students. SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or EBT, which is Electronic Benefit Transfer, which is what we used to refer to as food stamps. Approximately 1.5 million college students in America utilize SNAP, and that is only about 40% of the eligible students who utilize them. So 1.5 million is only 40% of the people who are eligible that are enrolled in college. Going off of that, food insecurity. 23% of undergraduate students and about 12% of graduate students experience food insecurity while they're enrolled in college. It's extremely, extremely common. And this can be for any number of reasons. A lot of times college students are just in a brand new financial situation, and we are often not equipped with the knowledge and resources we need to put our best foot forward. So, you see stereotypes of college students eating 25-cent packets of ramen noodles when in actuality that's probably the reality for many college students. Moving on to employment, which is on the bottom right there. Statistics show that students who work while enrolled in school are enrolled in college or university are about 20% less likely to complete their degrees. And many students are employed while completing their degree, because not working and completing college is just not a realistic situation for a lot of people. And then on the top right there, we have housing. We are seeing an increase in student housing insecurity, likely due to rising tuition costs and on-campus living costs. Students often do not have a rental history or credit for market rate housing, meaning that on-campus housing is usually the only option, and on-campus housing is extremely expensive and oftentimes more expensive than market rate housing, and often do not qualify for government subsidized housing, which leads to a rise in homelessness. There's the citations for that one because I could fit them on there. Great. So, proposed solutions and further discussion. What can we as educators do to support students experiencing poverty? Remaining cognizant of what effects poverty can have on students. If we're aware of what issues it can pose, it means that we can be flexible and help create solutions. Teaching with gaps in mind. If we, again, are aware of where gaps might be, it will be easier to fill them, because the first step to fixing a problem is recognizing where they are. And if we choose to ignore poverty as a barrier to equitable education, and treat it as not important, then there are going to be students who struggle. And then encouraging equity and inclusivity in our classroom. It's no secret that minority students experience higher rates of poverty, and if you're bridging and minding gaps in your classroom, then you're creating a more equitable space for learning. Opposing viewpoints. This was a little bit hard for me to find. I actually did end up asking for help from some of you. And a big opposing viewpoint to being cognizant and having a mindset that is knowledgeable about poverty is a no excuses approach to education, which basically implies that regardless of a student's situation, expectations should be the same. So where does this viewpoint come from? A common belief in our society is that impoverished people or communities are in poverty because of their own laziness rather than systemic issues, which is often not the case. Poverty can happen anywhere to anyone for any number of reasons. It's not because a person is lazy or not good enough or didn't work hard enough, and it is most certainly not the student's fault. So viewing poverty as an excuse rather than a barrier really isn't fair. This perspective does have some value in that we associate hard work with success, but so often people who are in poverty work incredibly hard and just are not lucky enough to beat the system, because beyond someone falling down on their luck, losing their job, what have you, there are still systemic issues in place that negate their ability to succeed in our society. This perspective fails to acknowledge sociological biases and systemic issues that relate to poverty, such as race, gender, sexual orientation, geographical location, and so on. And a more realistic approach would be to adjust curriculum and not the expectations to make learning accessible. So if you're giving an assignment that requires an online use of an online tool, providing alternative resources instead of just making an exception and being like, oh, well, you don't have to do that part. And so wrap up, just so we can kind of run back over everything that we learned today. Development. Poverty affects young children and their brain development very early on. Higher education. Effects of poverty are lasting and create new problems as students enter adulthood. A lot of times, as students graduate high school and enter higher education, that transitional period can be really stressful financially. Resources. Students who experience poverty have less access to educational resources. Stress. Factors like hunger, strenuous finances, and work-life balance can affect focus and mood, and perspective. Understanding links between bias and poverty can help us unlearn misled ideas about using poverty as a crutch. And support. Supporting and accommodating for students experiencing poverty while not lowering expectations helps to ensure success. Your attitude matters. Be a supportive and inclusive educator and remain in the know about pressing issues that are critical to your students' development, so that you can create the best possible situations and the best possible environments for them to learn. Here are all of my sources. 1, 2, 3. And thank you so much for watching. If anyone has any questions or wants to talk about this more, I would be so happy to. I really had a lot of fun researching this topic. Thank you so much.